Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of Theft of Swords by Michael J Sullivan. And this book was actually my Patreon VIP pick, so you guys have heard me talk about my Patreon book pick, which is where every month my Patreon supporters get to vote in a poll for a book that I'll read and review. But my Patreon VIPs are someone that I pick from a raffle selection. Every time I finish one Patreon VIP book, I pick another one. And so one person gets to pick any book for me to read off of my TBR. But moving forward, as my TBR shrinks, they can really actually pick like any book for me to read within reason. So it really is holding the ultimate power over my reading choices. And this Patreon VIP is Michelle, but if you're interested in contributing to my content in that way and potentially picking out books for me to read, I will link my Patreon on the screen. So this is the first volume in an adult fantasy trilogy, but really there's 6 books because this series was originally self-published, and then when it became traditionally published, the books were put into bind-up. So this is actually the first 2 books of the series, so the second book takes place 3 years after the first book, but I read this as all one book. Do you guys think I should count this as me reading 2 books? Because for some reason I usually do that with bind-ups, but for this I just read it as like one giant book and didn't take any breaks between them because it's about 600 pages and I feel like I could read that all at once. But yeah, let me know what you guys do if you've read this series. But this series follows Hadrian and Royce, and they are 2 famous thieves in this world. They are renowned for just being thieves that can get into impossible situations, and they end up getting hired mysteriously to do a last-minute gig to basically steal a sword. And it almost sounds too good to be true. And it is, and they end up getting framed for a much greater crime, and everything kind of goes from there. So first off, we talk about the world building. This is that like almost traditional sword and sorcery, high fantasy type world. So there's magic, there's like dwarves, there's elves. It's like that kind of world, but also a lot of like political intrigue, like that medieval based kind of world. So it felt very nostalgic in that way. Even though I didn't grow up reading a ton of like high fantasy books, I definitely grew up watching a lot of like high fantasy media, like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So this just felt like, oh, like a nice, like a warm hug, you know? You're just like, ooh, yay, I know all of this, you know? So that was just fun. Like there's like wizards and just all of that like high fantasy stuff without it being like pretentious feeling, because it's just a very fun feeling series. As far as our characters, I immediately loved Hadrian and Royce. Immediately. Hadrian is like that heart of gold character who is a criminal, but really like wants to help people. So he's almost like neutral good, you know, if we're looking at D&D alignments. And then Royce is grumpy and kind of self-serving, but really loves Hadrian. They love each other. So then he's almost like chaotic neutral, and it's so wonderful, their little combination of like who they are, and they're just vastly different kinds of people, but they work really well together as like opposites, and they're so good. I just instantly loved them, like their banter, their friendship, how they like vibe with each other, and then how they interact with like all the other characters, because there's other perspectives that we get in here as well, and I just really enjoyed all of them. One of my favorite wizard characters is in this. He is a joy. One of those like morally ambiguous wizard characters that you're like, are you good or are you bad? I don't know. I think it might depend on the page. Just not really sure. And I just really enjoy all of the people that they are interacting with. It's just a fun time. Lastly, we talk about the plot. The plot and the writing are just so, like I said, fun, fast-paced, easy to get into, and even like the mythology and like the lore of this world, like I said, since it is so like based on classic tropes, that is so easy to follow and to get into as well. Like I said, I read this as one continuous book, even though there's a 3-year jump between the first book and the second book, and it wasn't like, it didn't feel disjointed at all. It felt like it really flowed, but you still got to see the growth of the characters between those 2 storylines, and I just care deeply about them. If you really like thief stories, you're not going to be disappointed by this. You're going to enjoy this. I'm very much looking forward to this entire series. This is a trilogy of bind-ups, like I said. There's also, I think, a prequel series, and then there is a series that's going to follow another one of the characters also. I think that's coming out as well. So if you do get into this world, there's a lot that you can get into, but also you can just read them as like the one trilogy and be okay. So really liking all the potential here and very excited to continue on with this series and these 2 idiots. I gave this first volume 4.25 stars. So comment down below and let me know your thoughts on Theft of Swords. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.